Welcome back to the English class, children. So, we were dealing with the chapter titled The Address by Marga Minco. We have already discussed the events that happened in the first part of the story about how the narrator visited Mrs. Darling's house once and her memories about the past events. Now, let us move on and understand the concluding part of the story. So, part 3 it speaks about the second visit of the narrator to Mrs. Darling's house. So, the concluding part of the story describes the second visit of the narrator to Mrs. Darling's house. Let us see what happens in this section. So, after her first visit, she did not yield any result. She decided to visit a second time. This time, a girl of 15 years opened the door, as her mother was not at home. Hence, in this part, we are introduced to Mrs. Darling's daughter, who was almost 15 years old. So, the narrator asked about Mrs. Darling. She was told that Mrs. Darling was not at home. She followed the girl along the passage. She noticed an old fashioned iron candle holder which is known as Hanukkah. Moving on, the narrator was horrified to see the things when they went into the living rooms. She found herself in the midst of their old belongings, but they oppressed her as they were kept in strange surroundings and in a very tasteless manner. She was hurt to see her family's belongings lying in a very untidy manner. The narrator was keenly observing the girl who had a broad back similar to that of Mrs. Darling. So the girl was placing teacups for tea to be served. She was pouring tea from a white teapot which had a golden border on the lid. So Marga immediately recognizes that teapot as well. So she is also looking at the spoons which Mrs. Darling's daughter was taking out. She was able to understand that all these things belonged to them once. So all this crockery and all this cutlery belonged to the narrator's family, but perhaps the girl was not aware of this fact. She cracked a joke about eating dinner in those antique plates. So the narrator also found a burn mark on the tablecloth. The narrator remembers the time when her mother was alive and the narrator was at home either bored or ill. So her mother once asked her to polish the silver cutlery. She was surprised to hear that the cutlery that they were using was made of silver, and even Mrs. Darling's daughter was surprised to hear that they were using silver cutlery for everyday eating. Here, Marga remembers how she used to love the apple on the pewter plate. So you can see the image of the pewter plate here. Also, the narrator is able to remember the time when she was asked to clean the silver cutlery. You can see the images of all these things here. So these are the 4 or 5 important things that the narrator is able to recognize in Mrs. Darling's house. She was deeply affected after seeing all this, and suddenly the narrator decided that she could not stay there anymore. The address was correct, but the narrator didn't want to remember it anymore. She felt that the objects were linked to a memory of a time which no longer existed. They had lost their value in the strange surroundings. She comforted herself by thinking that her present house was too small to accommodate all the old stuff. She left the house, leaving all her family's belongings behind. So, this is the conclusion of this story. Narrator or Marga Minko, she is not ready to take any of this back with her. She is actually comforting herself, thinking that her present house was not able to accommodate all this, and she left the house without having all this because she was not able to have all these things with that emotion now. She was really hurt to see all those things in such a condition, and she was ready to leave all these things and move on to the future. So I hope you have understood the chapter. In the next module, we shall discuss the important questions. Thank you all